Thank you very much. So hi everyone, as was just mentioned today, I will be talking about the importance of innovation within maritime future fuels, as well as the role that we have at Connected Places Catapult to accelerate this transition. So first, just a bit of an introduction to Connected Places Catapult to those who are less familiar. We are the UK's innovation accelerator for cities, transport and place leadership. And you might think, what do we actually mean within that? Well, we connect businesses and public sector leaders to groundbreaking research. We also develop, implement and commercialise both new technologies and also innovation within existing markets, as well as looking to grow new markets in the UK and globally. Just to note that we're part of a wider Catapult network, and we focus within these 7 ecosystem areas that are on the screen at the moment, within cities, transport and places. Across all 7 of these areas, there is a prominent demand for more innovation within future fuels. And of course, today we're aligned to maritime and ports, and that's the area that I work in and I'm really passionate about. In terms of the next sort of 12 minutes or so, there's 3 areas that I really wanted to focus on. So first, we've got the transition path ahead in terms of innovation and targets with the implementation of future fuels. Second, and has been alluded to several times today, what are the transition barriers that we are hearing from industry, from academia, and from experts that we're regularly engaging with? And then third is, what is our role? What are we actively doing to accelerate innovation in this space? So I'll focus on the first one to begin with. Zero carbon fuels comprise the large majority of the emission savings in shipping. Around 87% was what the Climate Change Committee quoted in 2020. However, the path is not clear at the moment, and there remains many uncertainties for ports, for vessel operators, for regulators. It's quite a complex area due to the dependency on several fuels and the difference in buying power compared to other industries, aviation as an example, where hydrogen seems like the dominant option. And what we see as part of this can often be that a tailored solution is needed for each individual port, and they have such a diverse range of operators that they service and work with. What is certain, however, is that the future is multi-fuel, and I've just outlined a few examples on here in terms of net zero emission fuels and low emission fuels. Really interestingly, the ideal pathway ahead might involve, say, more low emission fuels to begin with, and then translate to more net zero emission proportion fuels in the future. And I think what we'll see over the next sort of 5 or 10 years or so is, as these technology readiness levels and commercial readiness levels develop, we'll probably align ourselves potentially to an area that we didn't to begin with. One point that I wanted to mention in terms of what we've observed in industry is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, and I'm sure that's familiar to a lot of people in the room, where we have port authorities, port operators, and we also have vessel operators, each of which can find it difficult to commit to one of these fuels on the board without knowing the plans of the other group, and that can dictate their decision. So it's really difficult in some cases to commit to one of these knowing that the vessels that will be coming to your port or the port that you're landing at has prioritised another fuel in terms of cost and availability. And that brings me on quite nicely to what barriers are in the way and what has been dictating our innovation efforts to date. So there's 6 areas here that I've outlined based on our ongoing engagement with partners, with academics, with industry experts. I'll start off with the certainty of the future fuel market, which I know has been referenced in a few presentations so far. But what we're hearing is continued uncertainty in terms of the global direction of which fuel will be most dominant, how available that will be to different areas in the UK, and the profitability, which I think underpins each of these challenges. The second area is on future vessel propulsion systems. So the propulsion technology itself varies in terms of readiness levels, and it's difficult to predict which one will advance the most quickly over time. The third one is around port operational requirements, so not just focusing on the vessels, I want to focus on the port operations themselves. Here, we currently know that there isn't enough electricity demand to sustain the energy demand levels of port operations. So we're going to need to bridge the gap with an alternative fuel. Which one is the question, and by how much? And that comes and ties itself quite closely together with the energy infrastructure and storage. This is something that we're seeing quite a lot as a focus across industry in terms of quantifying how much electricity is required, how much we can get from the grid, how much we can generate internally to be able to manage the expectation on how much of that alternative fuel is needed. And then there's the point around storage, and this varies depending on which fuel. So we know there's concerns in some cases around ammonia and hydrogen, and I'm sure there's many academics in the room that are working on areas of that what I've just spoken about. The fifth area is safety and security, and what I find fascinating is specific to ports. It's quite a complex challenge to be able to comply with regulations for different fuels and upskill operators and upskill our staff to be able to manage that, cope with that, and pivot depending on which one they're operating with. And I think that brings me on to the skills requirements side. And hopefully the next slide will go into what we've suggested as ways to bridge that over the next few years or so. One point from the House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee is that the most significant barriers to the adoption of zero-emission fuels are likely to be the cost and global availability of zero-emission fuels. That's what they said earlier this year, and that's what we're hearing from our engagement across industry. And I think it underpins all 6 of these areas on the screen. However, there's actions that we can take now, actions that we can strive towards over the next 5 to 10 years or so. And on the board is opportunities for early movement in that transition. So we've got the potential for ports to become energy hubs, not only look to generate their own energy, service the operations and vessels within the port, but also with surplus energy, redirect that back to the grid and provide that energy to the community around them. The green shipping corridors, which I know we had a session on earlier, but I think this is a way for us to demonstrate the use of that new fuel and everything that comes with that, all of the skills, all of the safety case, and the culture change that we need to take people on. That journey is really important. The port equipment demonstrations is a really interesting one as well, because by focusing on more small-scale use cases within the port, we can acclimatise to the use of hydrogen, for example. Although we know the technology is not all there in terms of meeting the energy density required for the heavier vehicles, but using those smaller demonstrations as a test case will pave the way, and we see that happen in other sectors as well. Renewable generation, in terms of studying, assessing which renewable generation option is most viable for each port. We've mentioned solar panels, wind farms today, also wave, and I think that ties in with the energy hub potential that is necessary to assess the viability of becoming an energy hub, is having a really deep understanding on your energy requirements, which can be really difficult in a port operation where we have different stakeholders owning different areas of the operation. And also, from my background in operational efficiencies, there are lots of efficiencies still to go at, and they're out there. The safety case can, in part, be learned from wider sectors where there potentially might be larger organisations with buying power. We've just mentioned Maersk, for example. How can they take that responsibility forwards on demonstrating the safety case for others? And I am strongly behind building skills through demonstrations as well as desk-based studies when they're safe, of course. On to my last point on accelerating innovation. I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive into one of our programs that we run at the Connected Places Catapult. That is our maritime flagship program, which has the objective of creating a more connected maritime innovation ecosystem, driving investment and driving collaboration. This is a multi-year program that runs every financial year. We're currently in year 3. Which is great news for us. And in the first couple of years, I'll just reflect on that briefly. We have defined and reaffirmed the industry's top priority challenges. We run a maritime SME innovation growth program every year, where we use the top priority challenges that the industry has defined to go back to SMEs and say, what solutions do you have in the market to address these challenges? And also bridging the gap between different stakeholders. Looking more recently over the past sort of 4 or 5 months or so, there's 2 outputs that I wanted to highlight on the slide. I'm not going to go through these in detail just because of the time, but would definitely suggest you look at the UK Maritime Investment Overview for a detailed look at opportunities in this space. And then also we had our alternative fuels report where we're applying steps to decarbonise and separating that out depending on the level of complexity for each port. In terms of what we're doing now, well, stakeholders across the industry have continued to express uncertainty on which fuels will be most commercially viable, and they need to make investment decisions now based on evidence, based on facts on when fuels will be commercially viable, when they'll be ready in terms of technology. And that's why this year, future fuels play a massive part of our programme, and that's the area of work that I'm leading on. So there's 2 things that we're working on in this area. The first is we want to develop a decarbonisation pathway in terms of enabling studies that not only ports but also vessel operators can look to, enabling technologies, quick wins in terms of energy efficiencies, operational efficiencies, reducing consumption, and a consolidated view of when each fuel can be adopted depending on the scale of operation. And I think that's such a key point for each port. It will really depend on, is it a harbour we're talking about? Is it a fishery? Is it a large-scale bulk carrier vessel port that we're looking to? And I'm just really excited in the work that we're doing. And if you would like to be part of that ongoing work, then please do get in touch. We want to make it real, and that's why we are going to be partnering with a UK port to tailor this to them and highlight areas for demonstration and further trial. I believe that's all I've got time for, so I'll say thank you very much. If you've got any questions, we've got our panel, or please do follow up.